Yesterday, at exactly 5:25 p.m., a breakthrough unfolded that could reshape the war in Eastern Europe. Ukrainian intelligence, working closely with Western financial watchdogs, announced the dismantling of a $12.4 billion shadow funding network connected to Beijing, one that had quietly sustained Russia's war machine since the early days of the invasion. The revelation from Kyiv has sent shockwaves through global power centers, exposing the sophistication of modern wartime financing and its deep geopolitical implications. The operation, codenamed Project Severance, represents a turning point. While most wartime victories are measured in territory or missile strikes, this success was won in the invisible realm of finance. Ukraine's security service confirmed months of covert work, with unnamed Western partners tracing vast flows of money through a maze of shell companies across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. At its core, investigators found a structure tied to Chinese state-linked enterprises that had funneled resources, raw materials, and credits into Russia's wartime economy. Early intelligence briefings suggest the network was engineered to evade Western sanctions, using cryptocurrency transactions, disguised export credits, and falsified supply chain records to mask the origin of goods. These included microchips, drone parts, precision tools, and rare earth elements, materials crucial to Russia's military production under heavy embargo. In effect, the network had served as a lifeline, keeping Moscow's defense industries afloat. This revelation lands amid rising diplomatic tension between Beijing and Europe. For months, Western intelligence had suspected Chinese firms of indirectly aiding Russia, while Beijing claimed neutrality. But this discovery reveals something far deeper: an organized multi-billion-dollar structure suggesting deliberate, state-tolerated support. At a briefing in Kyiv, Andriy Yusov, spokesperson for Ukrainian defense intelligence, called the operation a strike at the invisible arteries of war. He emphasized that modern conflicts are sustained by financial flows as much as by weapons. Every missile launched at our cities has a financial trail behind it. We are learning to fight not just on land, but in the ledgers of those who enable aggression. Documents seized during the operation detail over 300 transactions routed through firms in Hong Kong, Singapore, and the UAE, entities serving as fronts for Russian importers of sanctioned goods. Many specialized in dual-use technologies, granting them plausible deniability while enabling covert military supply chains. Western analysts say this disruption could deliver a crippling blow to Russia's war economy. Since 2022, Moscow has leaned on covert trade and alternative finance to survive sanctions. By cutting off a $12.4 billion artery, Ukraine may have targeted one of Russia's key sources of liquidity. One European analyst described it as severing one of the main arteries of Russia's survival mechanism. Kyiv, careful not to provoke a direct confrontation with Beijing, avoided accusing the Chinese state outright. Instead, officials referred to state-linked enterprises and commercial actors operating under strategic cover, preserving diplomatic balance while making clear the systemic nature of the operation. Still, the implications are hard to ignore. The exposure of a Chinese-backed funding web arrives just as Beijing presents itself as a potential peacemaker. To many in the West, this revelation confirms that China's neutrality is more illusion than reality, strategic ambiguity at best, covert collaboration at worst. Inside China, the reaction was defensive. State media dismissed the reports as Western misinformation aimed at discrediting China's global trade integrity. Yet Ukrainian intelligence reportedly released transactional data and intercepted communications persuasive enough to draw scrutiny from global regulators, including the US Treasury, which is preparing new sanctions. While Moscow officially dismissed the revelation as propaganda, insiders privately worried about looming liquidity issues and potential shortages for defense manufacturers. Beyond the economic damage, the operation carries immense symbolic weight. Ukraine has opened a new financial battlefield, proving modern wars are waged not just with soldiers, but with intelligence and economic pressure, asserting itself as a capable player. Western governments are now in emergency consultations over secondary sanctions targeting companies linked to the network. Washington, Brussels, and Tokyo are coordinating responses, discussing tighter export controls and stricter monitoring of cryptocurrency transfers, steps that could further isolate Russia and limit Beijing's flexibility. At 7:40 p.m. in London, Western intelligence briefings confirmed the coordinated nature of the operation, marking one of the most significant joint financial crackdowns since 2022. At the heart of the global debate lies a question. What does this mean for China's ambitions? Beijing's long campaign to portray itself as the leader of a multipolar world now faces severe credibility damage. Being tied, even indirectly, to a wartime funding system threatens to erode its diplomatic capital. According to Ukrainian intelligence sources, Project Severance began quietly in the final months of 2024. Analysts in the SBU detected irregular capital flows linked to small electronics firms in Southeast Asia, initially minor sums disguised as routine trade. Suspicion grew when the same firms repeatedly surfaced in supply chain audits of Russian military contractors. Forensic accountants noticed recurring cryptocurrency wallets tied to these companies, with transfers eventually ending up in Russian banks already under Western sanctions. What started as an anomaly soon revealed a structured global web, a hybrid system of trade finance and digital laundering. By early 2025, Ukraine, the UK's National Crime Agency, and the US Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, had mapped what they dubbed the Beijing Corridor. This consisted of more than 200 companies registered in opaque jurisdictions, primarily in Hong Kong and Singapore, exploiting high trade volumes and limited transparency to conceal illicit flows. Intelligence intercepts exposed mirror trade schemes, buying and selling goods at manipulated prices to move capital undetected. A shipment of industrial batteries might be declared at 10 times its value, creating artificial credits routed to Russian defense accounts. Correspondents tied several firms to Chinese state-linked trade promotion agencies, organizations often used to advance national interests under the guise of commerce. Through private intermediaries, the network preserved plausible deniability while pursuing coordinated goals. The investigation blended financial forensics, cyber ops, and human intelligence. Ukrainian and Western agents reportedly infiltrated encrypted platforms used by middlemen. One intercepted exchange captured a Singaporean broker assuring a Russian client, "The next shipment is cleared through Beijing's list. No problem expected at customs." Such language suggested official awareness, if not direct involvement, within Chinese bureaucratic circles. By March 2025, the scope was undeniable. The $12.4 billion sum represented aggregated transactions over 18 months, combining commodities and cash equivalents. Intelligence officials called it the invisible logistics arm of Moscow's resilience. Without it, Russian defense sectors, particularly in drones, radar, and precision electronics, would have collapsed. What made Project Severance effective was international coordination. Ukraine worked with the European Central Bank, Japan's Financial Services Agency, and intelligence units in Canada and Australia under a joint data-sharing framework. One diplomat called it a global alliance for financial warfare. Analysts traced links from gold shipments in Dubai to electronic parts in Shenzhen, all converging on Russian end users. In late October 2025, synchronized asset freezes and revoked licenses marked the public finale of a lengthy covert operation. For Beijing, this is a strategic embarrassment, as the evidence undermines its claims of respecting international norms by implicating state-linked entities. For Russia, the disruption is severe. This severed supply line, crucial for circumventing sanctions, creates immediate strain on its war industry, potentially slashing critical imports by 30% and delaying aircraft production. The timing is disastrous for Moscow. With winter looming and energy revenues tightening under Western shipping restrictions, the collapse of this financial corridor magnifies Russia's economic vulnerability. For Ukraine, however, the operation is a strategic triumph. By exposing the financial infrastructure behind Russia's resilience, Kyiv has elevated its global stature. Countries once hesitant to align with Ukraine, fearing economic fallout from Chin, are now reconsidering. The operation offers both moral justification and strategic precedent for deeper cooperation in financial intelligence and tech regulation. Western allies hail it as a model for 21st century conflict, a financial counteroffensive that complements Ukraine's battlefield endurance. One senior US Treasury official called it a blueprint for how democracies can defend themselves economically. The victory underscores that modern wars are contests not only for territory, but for control of global financial arteries. Yet the operation also exposes uncomfortable truths about global trade. The revelation of Chinese firms financing wartime economies forces multinational corporations to scrutinize their supply chains. Western regulators are expanding definitions of complicity, meaning even indirect participation could invite severe penalties. Markets reacted swiftly. Major banks suspended dealings with several Chinese intermediaries, and shares of export firms in Hong Kong and Shanghai tumbled amid uncertainty. Beijing condemned these moves as economic coercion, accusing the West of weaponizing finance to contain its rise. But the momentum has shifted. By weaponizing transparency, Ukraine has proven that data, intelligence, and cooperation can rival missiles in power. The battlefield is everywhere now. In banks, in servers, in trade routes, said one Ukrainian analyst. We just opened a new front. Intelligence agencies are already probing whether similar financial webs connect Iran, North Korea, or Belarus to Russia's supply chains. If proven, a new wave of sanctions and crackdowns could follow, expanding the financial war far beyond Europe. The success of Project Severance signals a strategic evolution. Ukraine, once seen as a victim of aggression, is now shaping global systems of accountability. As one European official put it, Ukraine didn't just cut off a funding line, it exposed the world's dependence on systems that sustain conflict. That is the real victory. When Ukraine announced the network's dismantling, it didn't just mark an intelligent success, it redefined global warfare. The aftershocks are still spreading through governments, markets, and intelligence communities, forcing a reckoning with how deeply economics and conflict intertwine. For China, the timing is especially painful. Beijing has sought to remake global trade through the Belt and Road Initiative, branding itself as the architect of a new economic order. Now, revelations of state-linked complicity in wartime financing threaten that image. Chinese diplomats insist the network was an independent commercial operation without state oversight, but analysts note that many implicated companies received state export subsidies or operated in government-regulated zones. The exposure also undermines China's diplomatic campaign. Just weeks before the announcement, Chinese officials had been courting Europe to position themselves as mediators in the war. That effort now lies in ruins. European leaders see this as validation of long-held doubts about Beijing's neutrality. For Russia, the implications are severe. The loss of this hidden funding stream deprives Moscow of access to high-grade semiconductors, machine tools, and raw materials, potentially reducing its defense output by up to 25% before winter's end. Politically, it highlights Moscow's dependence on foreign partners, a contradiction to its narrative of independence. But the deeper transformation may be Ukraine's global image. Once cast as a nation fighting merely for survival, Kyiv now demonstrates strategic capability on par with major powers. The exposure of Beijing's financial web is not only an intelligence triumph, but a statement of Ukraine's new role as an architect of global financial security. The symbolic power of this victory cannot be overstated. Ukraine has proven that transparency itself can be weaponized, that modern warfare is fought not just on battlefields, but within networks of money and influence. Western allies recognize this. Within hours, leaders from the US, EU, and Japan pledged to expand financial surveillance and smart sanctions targeting intermediaries. Meanwhile, fears of secondary sanctions shook China's markets and alarmed Russia's other allies, prompting intelligence agencies to investigate similar networks. The revelation has fueled urgent debates at the United Nations over supply chain transparency and failing oversight systems. In response, Western partners are developing financial deterrence to disrupt aggressive financial pipelines preemptively. Ukraine remains aware that Russia will rebuild, perhaps elsewhere, and China may double down on its economic narrative, continuing the global financial struggle. Yet one truth endures: Ukraine has changed the rules. In modern warfare, victory is no longer measured in square kilometers, but in influence, legitimacy, and control of information. By cutting Beijing's secret pipeline to Moscow, Ukraine hasn't just defended its sovereignty, it has reshaped the architecture of global accountability. As dusk settled over Kyiv last night, the skyline glowed defiantly. The war that began in trenches has now entered boardrooms and banking systems, and in this new arena, Ukraine has proven it can fight and win.